Hey folks, Sam Luce here with iZotope. Thanks for joining me. In this video, I want to consider how to EQ bass and low end in a mix and discuss some techniques for how we can make it the best it can be. Not enough bass in a track can make it seem weak and empty, but too much can make it seem bloated and uneven. So it's really important that we strike the correct balance here. I want to consider the role of bass in a mix and discuss how you can make the most of it, whatever the instrument may be that's supplying that low end. Let's check it out. So firstly, we need to consider exactly what role bass plays in the track. And when I talk about bass, I'm talking about all the elements that you may describe using that word. So this means bass instruments, bass guitars, synths, that kind of thing, but also bass drums, so kicks, low tune percussion like toms. But I'm also considering it in a more holistic way, so anything that sits at 200 Hertz or below. Once we get above that, we're really talking about the low mids. We're going to be considering this area, but really the power in a mix is going to come from below 200 Hertz. Whatever it is, let's work out how we want to approach this thing we call bass. So before anything, let's take a listen to this track with some fairly complex bass issues going on that we need to resolve. As always, when we're considering low end in a video, you're going to want to be sat in front of a set of speakers with decent low end extension or be wearing headphones to get the full effect. There's three ways that I'm going to show you how to make sure your bass is in check. The first is cleanup, getting rid of what isn't required with fairly broad strokes. Second is instrument-specific EQ. This is dependent on the instrument we're EQing and aiming to make that one instrument sound good. Number three is pocket EQ. This is taking the previous EQ step into consideration, but it's about making different bass elements all work together, making them all fit together in a mix. We can make an instrument sound good on its own, but that's really less than half the battle. We need to make sure everything in the bottom end works together, and these three steps are going to achieve that. But at the end, I'm also going to show you a much more advanced bonus tip, so make sure you stick around for that to really take your low end to the next level. So starting off with the kick, I've just put Neutron 4 on here. And I want to apply some high pass filters, but not only that, I want to show you exactly what result this is having, because at the level that these are going on, at the kind of low frequencies these are actually getting rid of, sometimes it can be difficult to actually hear the effect that they're having, but using a meter like Insight, we can see exactly the difference these are going to make to the overall loudness of the track. So first of all, let's apply this high pass filter and then we'll see what difference it's actually making. So the best way that I usually apply these filters is to go to the high pass, go to something flat, and typically I'm going to go to 12 dB per octave. So it's not too steep, but it's not too gentle either. And I'm going to bring this all the way down and then just start bringing it up until I notice a difference and then bring it down slightly from there. Let's check it out. So I feel at about 35 Hertz, that's making enough of a difference. Anything higher than that was really kind of killing the low end a little bit too much. If I just solo the kick, you're going to hear that even more. That's taking away too much. Down at 35 is not killing the low end too much, but it's still cleaning things up. And we can see that if we take a look at Insight, we can see exactly what the overall loudness is going to be. So if we listen to it without the filter on, let's take a look at this momentary loudness. So this is in LUFS, this is loudness units, and this is a way that we can measure the overall perceived loudness of our track. So this is before, this is without any filters on at all. So just looking at this momentary, this kind of relatively short-term kind of reading, and this is 21.6. And now if we bring the filter on, it's at -22. So we've gained almost half a unit there, which you can see that's not a massive amount, but in the grand scheme of the mix, in the grand scheme of the master, if you're applying this to multiple channels, you can see how you're getting rid of low end that you're not really noticing, but is there and is going to affect the overall loudness. Once we've cleaned up the track, we're ready for some boosts. So as a general rule, I'm always going to be cutting before I'm boosting. It makes sense to get rid of what you don't want before you reassess and start adding what you do want. So let's reassess and start boosting some EQ. So let's just listen to the song with all the instruments in and hear where we think we need to fit that kick and bass in. It sounds to me like the kick needs to sit a little bit lower than the sub bass. Although it's called a sub bass, it's mainly because it's just got low frequencies in there, and I feel like that needs to sit a little bit higher. So for the kick drum, I'm just going to go for something around maybe 60 hertz, maybe something a little higher, just to get that real thump. And then I'm going to apply a boost to the sub bass, which is going to sit a bit higher than that. I don't want them to be sitting at the same area, because if we do that, then we're just making matters worse. We're making the low end just get clogged up. So let's apply this boost to the kick. That's adding some real life in the low end, some real energy. And I need to kind of match that in the sub bass, in the bass line, but I don't want to go for 61 hertz or anything really close to that. I'm gonna go a little bit higher. So maybe try something around 100 hertz, just so they're not clashing. What you'll notice is that the boosts I'm making are fairly large, so around 6 dB on this one and around 7 dB on this one. When we're dealing with low end, sometimes we need to add a load of gain, a load of bottom, because in top end, if we add 3 dB to the top end, then it's sometimes pretty obvious that we've added that and it can get harsh quite easily. But low end is a different beast. Larger boosts and larger cuts are sometimes necessary, and in this track, I definitely feel like they are. So let's have a listen to the whole thing with all the other instruments in, without any EQ on there, so no high pass filters, no boosts, and then we'll see what we've added. Once we've got the low end instruments sounding great on their own, it's time to start making them all fit together. This is a kind of pocket mixing where we're making each element fit in its own space. We're putting each element in its own pocket in the low end spectrum to make sure they're not overlapping and getting in the way of each other. Neutron has a really handy unmasking feature that's going to work wonders here. So the masking filter allows us to see what's going on another track. So here I'm on the kick track, and I can essentially feed in what's happening in the sub bass into this instance of Neutron, and vice versa. So I'll go to the masking feature on the sub bass and go to the kick on Neutron. Now, if I just hit play, you're going to see an orange trace appearing on the visualizer, and that is the other track that is coming in. So on the kick, you're going to see what's happening in the bass on this visualizer here, and vice versa. On the bass, you're going to see the kick appear here. Just check it out. And what's really great about this is the inverse link. So if I just pop the inverse link on, then it's going to appear this kind of dotted line, and that is the relative boost that is happening on the other EQ. So you can see that this dotted line here on the kick track is the area that I've boosted in the sub bass track, and you can see the kick EQ on the sub bass here. So what we want to do here is apply some complementary EQ cuts and boosts. Just by clicking this band, watch what happens over here on the kick track. It's going to apply a dip. And this is fantastic for pocket mixing because it means we've got a boost in a track. So on the kick, it's 60 hertz. On the bass, it's 100 hertz. But the 100 hertz area on the kick is still there. It's still present. It's still kind of doing its thing. And we want to get rid of it so that the bass has room to shine, and vice versa as well. We should only be allowing really one instrument to be dominating a specific frequency area. So I'm going to do the same thing over on the kick track. Just click this and it's going to apply that cut. And this is just allowing us to create that pocket, just allowing the instruments to sit in their own space. Most of us are probably aware of the sidechain kick trick, where we apply a compressor to a bass track, then insert the kick into the sidechain of that compressor. This makes sure the bass ducks out of the way when the kick is present and allows room for it to breathe, but we can take that a few steps further and really get some space opened up and at the same time elevate that low end. What I want to do here is activate the sidechain on the bass instrument and then feed the kick into there, but as I said, I'm not going to be using compression here, I'm going to be using dynamic EQ. So the way that this differs from a usual EQ is that it's only going to EQ if. It's only going to EQ if the kick is present. And I may not want to get rid of that 60 Hertz altogether from the sub bass because it's an important area for that sub bass to occupy, but when the kick hits, I want it to dip down. So what I'm going to do is turn these bands back on, and then on this second band here, on the sub bass, I'm going to go across to this menu, put on dynamic, sidechain, and external. So this is going to read whatever is coming in the sidechain here that I just selected the kick on. And you'll see that as I click play, it's just going to start ducking down, but only when the kick is present. And we can make this as harsh or as gentle as we like, really. And as I bring this down more, you'll see on the kick track, it's actually bringing up that boost. So they are being complementary to each other. But there's another way that we can bring it down without affecting the boost over at this side. If we go to our dynamic section here, then this is kind of like the threshold. So if I bring the threshold all the way up, we'll see the signal appearing in this little bar here. But if the bar doesn't protrude above the threshold, it's not going to EQ down. So essentially, the more I bring down this slider here for the threshold, the more it is going to EQ. And you can experiment with this in your own tracks and work out a nice balance there. So you've got your boost in the kick, and now you've got a dynamic EQ cut in the bass that is going to work in tandem, and that inverse link is just going to set it all up for you. There's another thing that I want to do here about the mid-range, the kind of low-mid area where it's kind of lacking in that area somewhat. We can add a little bit of flavour to it, something a bit more in the harmonic area. So I'm going to add a boost here, and this boost is not necessarily about just applying this frequency area, it's about what's going to come next. So I'm also going to add an exciter into this, and this is going to excite the frequencies above 200 Hertz. So in that area, kind of outside of the bass frequencies we've been talking about before. And you're not going to notice it too much as I bring it in because there's not that much of it in the original track, but as I excite it, as I bring the harmonics in, you're really going to notice it. So a 15 dB boost there, and you didn't really notice that much of a change. We've also got a dip over in the kick drum, but it's not making much of a difference because not much actually lives in that region. So we're only going to notice the difference when I bring the exciter in. Now I'm going to apply a cut. I'm going to use a split band exciter. I don't want to excite the low end. I'm going to leave that one alone. And I'm just going to excite the mids and the highs, anything above that 200 Hertz. Now, the reason that I've boosted into that is because this is going to bring up that region. So it's actually going to be forcing it into the exciter. And you'll hear as I bring this exciter up, then it's going to really add some harmonics to that sound. And this is a little trick that's going to be useful if you're having trouble getting your bass heard on smaller speakers as well. Just exciting and kind of saturating that area above the low end is going to help it to come through. You're really starting to hear it there. It's just got a bit of a presence. It's just got a bit of a saturation harmonic kind of thing. So let's take a listen to it before the exciter and then with it afterwards. You could even go one step further with this and apply an upward dynamic EQ to that band. So if we take a look at that same menu, go to dynamic and then go to sidechain, but we want to make this so that it's just going upwards. So if I bring this down to access the up, then bring it up again, then we know that this is only going to be activated once the kick is present. This is again reading the sidechain. So let's adjust this threshold. So it may be that dynamically EQing something is going to work best for your track, or maybe the static EQ, but giving you some tools so that you know what's available and you know what is possible just by using Neutron. There are so many features in here that are going to help you get that bottom end, and being able to excite the higher frequencies and being able to apply that dynamic band to the upper frequencies as well is really, really useful. Low end can be notoriously tricky to get right, but as long as you're following a few key rules, remove what you don't need, give each instrument its own space in the frequency spectrum, and then make sure no two instruments are clashing, you can get some really great results. If you've got any tips for mixing low end, whether it's making 808s hit harder or getting bass to sound right on small speakers, I'd love to hear them. So you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.